High heels, bubble wrap and microwave ovens seem completely ordinary today. But their original stories are anything but ordinary. Some began as failed inventions, others were discovered by accident, and a few were originally designed for purposes you would never expect. From wallpaper, nobody wanted to a melted chocolate bar that changed kitchens forever. Here are 7 everyday objects with surprisingly strange origins. High heels were not originally created as women's fashion. They were first worn by men. One of the earliest important examples comes from Persian cavalry several centuries ago. Mounted soldiers wore shoes with raised heels because the design helped secure their feet inside the stirrups. That extra grip made it easier for them to stand while riding and fire arrows with greater stability. At first, the heel was practical military equipment. But when Persian fashion reached Europe during the late 16th and early 17th centuries, wealthy aristocrats became fascinated by it. European men began wearing high heels as symbols of power, status, and privilege. The shoes made them appear taller and more commanding. They were also expensive and completely impractical for physical labor, which made them perfect for showing that the wearer was wealthy enough not to work. Powerful figures, such as King Louis XIV of France, became famous for wearing elaborate heels at court. Over time, men's fashion moved towards simpler footwear, while heels became increasingly associated with women. So an item now seen as a classic symbol of women's fashion actually began as practical footwear for male horsemen and later became a statement of masculine wealth and authority. Bubble wrap was originally created as wallpaper. In 1957, engineers Alfred Fielding and Mark J. Vance sealed two thin sheets of plastic together, trapping hundreds of tiny air bubbles between them. Their goal was to create a modern, three-dimensional wall covering that would give rooms an unusual textured appearance. There was just one problem. Almost nobody wanted to decorate their home with plastic bubbles. The wallpaper idea failed, but the inventors believed the material still had potential. They next tried selling it as insulation for greenhouses. That idea also failed to attract much interest. Eventually, they realized the trapped air made the material lightweight, flexible, and excellent at protecting fragile objects. Fielding and J. Vance founded the Sealed Air Corporation, and their failed wallpaper experiment became a revolutionary packaging product. One of its early major uses was protecting IBM computers during transportation. Today, bubble wrap is used around the world to protect everything from glassware and electronics to furniture and valuable collectibles. And, of course, many people find popping the bubbles almost as entertaining as opening the package itself. So one of the world's most recognizable packaging materials began as wallpaper that nobody wanted. Tea bags became popular because customers apparently misunderstood the packaging. Around 1908, New York tea merchant Thomas Sullivan began sending small samples of loose tea to customers inside silk pouches. The bags were intended simply as a convenient and inexpensive way to package each sample. Customers were expected to open them and pour the leaves into a traditional teapot. Instead, some reportedly placed the entire pouch directly into hot water. They discovered that the bag worked like a small tea infuser, keeping the leaves contained while the flavor escaped into the cup. When customers began requesting more tea in the same convenient form, Sullivan recognized the opportunity. He replaced the tightly woven silk with more porous gauze, allowing water to circulate more easily around the leaves. However, Sullivan probably did not invent the basic idea himself. In 1901, Roberta Lawson and Mary Malloran, had already filed a patent for a small fabric holder designed to brew a single serving of tea without filling an entire pot. Sullivan's sample bags helped popularize the concept, and later paper designs transformed it into the familiar tea bag used today. So one of the world's most common ways of making tea may have spread, because customers brewed the packaging instead of opening it. An early form of the chainsaw was developed as a surgical instrument not for cutting down trees. During the late 18th century, Scottish doctors John Aitken and James Jeffrey worked with a flexible cutting tool made from a fine chain of serrated metal links. It looked nothing like the large petrol-powered chainsaws used today. Instead, it was small, operated by hand, and designed to cut through bone more quickly and precisely than an ordinary surgical knife. Aitken proposed using the tool during a procedure called a symphysiotomy. This was performed when a baby could not pass through the birth canal. The surgeon cut through the cartilage joining the two sides of the pelvis, allowing it to widen slightly and create more room for delivery. At the time, caesarean sections were extremely dangerous, and modern anesthesia, antibiotics and safe surgical techniques did not yet exist. Jeffrey also promoted the chain-based saw for removing damaged or diseased bone elsewhere in the body. Later medical instruments refined the idea, including the hand-cranked osteotome developed in the 19th century. Eventually, the same basic principle of moving chain fitted with cutting teeth was adapted into tools for timber. So the modern chainsaw was not literally created in a maternity ward, but one of its earliest mechanical ancestors really was designed partly for difficult childbirth. The Frisbee strange history begins with an ordinary metal pie tin. The Frisbee Pie Company opened in Bridgeport, Connecticut, during the 19th century and supplied pies across New England. After eating them, university students discovered that the empty tins could be thrown through the air. The metal plates were not particularly safe or comfortable to catch, so students reportedly shouted Frisbee as a warning before sending one flying towards somebody. But the familiar plastic disc came later. During the 1940s, Walter Frederick Morrison began experimenting with flying discs after tossing round lids and pans for fun. He and Warren Franchione developed a plastic version that flew more smoothly and accurately than a heavy metal tin. Morrison later improved the design and called it the Pluto Platter, taking advantage of America's growing fascination with flying saucers. The toy company Wham-O acquired the design and began selling it during the 1950s. After learning that students already called flying discs Frisbees, Wham-O renamed its product the Frisbee, changing the spelling slightly. So the pie tins did not directly become modern plastic Frisbees, but students throwing them helped create the game, the tradition and, most importantly, the famous name still used today. The microwave oven began with a melted chocolate bar. In 1945, American engineer Percy Spencer was working for the Raytheon Company, helping to develop magnetrons for radar equipment. A magnetron is a device that produces powerful microwave energy. While Spencer was standing near an active magnetron, he noticed that the chocolate bar inside his pocket had unexpectedly melted. Instead of dismissing it as an inconvenience, he became curious. Spencer began experimenting with other foods. He placed popcorn kernels near the equipment and watched them burst open. During another test, an egg reportedly heated so quickly that it exploded in a colleague's face. Spencer realized that microwave energy could heat food rapidly by causing water molecules inside it to move. Raytheon then built an enclosed metal box that trapped the microwaves and directed their energy towards food. The company filed a patent for microwave cooking in 1945. The first commercial microwave oven, called the Radaranch, arrived a few years later. It was enormous, expensive, and designed mainly for restaurants and commercial kitchens. Smaller and more affordable models eventually reached ordinary homes. So the appliance, now used for reheating leftovers, began when an engineer discovered a melted chocolate bar inside his pocket. Post-it notes began with an adhesive that appeared to be a failure. In 1968, 3M scientist Spencer Silver was trying to create a strong glue. Instead, he developed an unusual adhesive made from tiny microscopic spheres. It stuck lightly to surfaces, but it could also be removed without leaving much residue or causing damage. The problem was that nobody knew what to use it for. Silver spent years sharing the invention with colleagues, hoping somebody would recognize its potential. Then another 3 meters scientist, Art Fry, remembered the adhesive while singing in his church choir. Fry used small pieces of paper to mark pages in his hymn book, but they repeatedly slipped out. He realized Silver's removable glue could hold a bookmark in place without damaging the page. Fry coated one edge of a piece of paper with the adhesive. It worked as a bookmark, but he soon discovered it was even more useful for writing temporary messages and reminders. Developing a reliable product was still difficult. The adhesive had to remain on the note instead of transferring onto the surface beneath it. Early market tests were disappointing because people did not immediately understand why they needed the product. But once free samples were handed out, users quickly became attached to them. Post-it notes launched nationally in the United States in 1980 and eventually became one of the world's most recognizable office products. So the familiar yellow note exists because the scientists found the perfect use for a glue that was not strong enough.